child revolution, where healing and consciousness spark transformation, helping you to reclaim your power and create the life you were meant to live.
Welcome back to the Inner Child Revolution. I'm your host, Nico and Jean. Today, we're going to talk about something that I think is going to shift how you see this entire body of work. Because if you've been doing inner child work, or if you've been feeling pulled towards it, I want you to consider the possibility that what's happening isn't just healing, it's awakening. If you're feeling the pull towards the child, let's start with that pull, that thing that brought you here. Maybe it was a book, maybe it was a conversation, maybe it was a moment in your life where something really cracked open and you realized, oh, there's a younger version of me that is still running the show. However it happened, something called you towards this work. And I think most of us frame that moment as a therapeutic one. We say things like, I need to heal, or I need to go back and fix what's broken, or I need to work through my stuff so I can move forward. And, none of that is wrong, but I want to offer you a bigger frame. What if the pull towards the child isn't just about healing the past? What if it's a sign that something is waking up in you? There is a child in the mystical tradition, and this idea isn't new. It shows up across sacred texts and mystical traditions, this recurring symbolism of the child as the beginning of a spiritual awakening. The idea that you must become like a child to enter the kingdom, and that the child represents closeness to the divine. And that there's something about the nature of the child, not the trauma of the child, but the nature of the child that is the doorway. You see, Neville Goddard talks about this extensively. In his framework, the appearance of the child is one of the signs of mystical awakening. It's not a metaphor for him, it's an actual marker, a spiritual event. Now, I'm not saying that every person who starts doing inner child healing is going to have a mystical vision. That's not the point. The point is, across traditions, the child keeps showing up as a symbol of something sacred. And if you're feeling drawn to reconnect with the child within you, to see them, hear them, or hold them, maybe that impulse deserves more reverence than we've been giving it. Maybe it's not just therapy. Maybe it's the beginning of something much deeper. You see, reparenting is an inner conversation. Here's where this gets really practical. Neville Goddard teaches that your inner conversation, the dialogue happening inside you all day long, is what creates your reality. Not your vision board or your 5-year plan, your inner conversation. Okay, the things that you say to yourself about yourself, the way you speak to yourself when no one is listening. And he describes this as actually what creates your identity. So I want you to think about what reparenting actually is. Reparenting is an inner conversation. It's the adult self speaking to the child self. It is you, the conscious, aware, present tense you, going inward and saying something different to that younger version of yourself, like something like, you're safe now and I see you, or that wasn't okay and I'm not going to let that happen again. Or you don't have to perform for love, you're already enough. So that's not just healing language, that is a consciousness practice. Because if your inner conversation is creating your reality, and you shift that conversation from one of fear and abandonment and proving to one of safety and sovereignty and enoughness, you're not just comforting a memory, you're changing what you're creating. Here's the quantum piece is the past is not fixed. This is where quantum physics enters the conversation. One of the principles we come back to again and again on this show is the role of the observer in quantum theory. The act of observation changes what is being observed. The observer and the observed are not separate. So when you go back to a past event with your inner child, when you revisit a memory where they didn't get what they needed, and then you give them something different in that conversation, you're not just imagining a nicer version of what happened. You are changing what you're observing. And if the past only exists as what we are observing in the present moment, then the past itself is shifting. This is revision. And this is what Neville Goddard teaches. The past is not a fixed thing sitting behind you that you can never change. The past is a living thing that you're actively observing right now. And when that observation changes, the reference point changes. And when the reference point changes, the present changes. And when the present changes, what you're available for, what you believe is possible, what you're willing to receive, the future changes too. So reparenting isn't just a metaphor, it's actual mechanics. So there's a missing piece here. And I've been wanting to say this for a while, and I think I'm really finally ready to just say this. I want to say something about these teachings, the New Thought authors, the consciousness frameworks, all of it, because I think there's an important piece that was missing, not because they were wrong, but because science just wasn't there yet. You know, a lot of these teachers lived at a time when we didn't understand the brain the way we do now. And we didn't understand how trauma actually affects the nervous system and how it changes our ability to regulate our emotions and how it wires patterns into the body that don't just go away because we decide to think differently. So, a lot of the language in those traditions, and I love these traditions, it's very directive, sometimes like destroying the negative thought or cut off the fear or just stop thinking it, replace it, override it. And you know, for some people in those moments, that might work. But for a lot of people, especially people who grew up in chaotic or unsafe or emotionally immature homes, that instruction lands like one more demand to perform, or one more voice telling them they're doing it wrong, or one more authority saying just control yourself. Because what that framework didn't account for is that the resistance isn't just a bad habit of thinking. The resistance is a part of you. It's a young part, a scared part, a part that learned to protect you by holding on to fear, by staying small, and by not letting you want too much. And you don't destroy that part, okay? You don't annihilate your own inner child because they're inconvenient to your manifesting practice. You work with them, you meet them with compassion, you listen to what they're actually afraid of. And then you do the thing we've been talking about this whole episode. You reparent. You have the inner conversation and you give them what they didn't get. That's integration. It's not destruction or overriding, it's integration. And I believe that that's the piece that was missing. That's what modern psychology and trauma science has given us that those early teachers didn't have access to. The understanding that you can't just command a traumatized nervous system to be different, but you can create safety within yourself through the relationship between the adult self and the child self. And from that safety, the shift happens naturally. The consciousness work and the inner child work aren't two separate things. They never were. Inner child healing is how the consciousness work actually lands in a human body with a real nervous system and a real history. So let's bring this home to where you live and work. If you're a coach, healer, a transformation professional, a creative, you may have been treating your inner child work as something separate from your actual work, like it's maintenance or it's the thing you do in the background so you can show up better for your clients. And I want to challenge that. This is the work, not just the personal development part of the work, the consciousness part. When you reparent and when you shift the inner conversation, you are literally changing the identity from which you operate. And identity is the source of everything you manifest. You know this already. Not the strategy, not the hustle, right? You've heard that. Not the right offer at the right time, but your identity, who you believe you are. So when you sit with your inner child and revise a memory where you learned that it wasn't safe to be seen, or that wanting too much was dangerous, or that your worth was conditional on your performance, you're not just processing an old emotion. You're rewriting the identity that has been running your business, your relationships, your capacity to receive. That's not healing on the side, okay? That's the most advanced manifesting work you can do. So here's what I want you to take from today. If you've been minimizing this work, if you've been thinking of inner child healing as something I just need to get through so I can get to the real stuff, I want you to flip that. This is the real stuff. The pull towards the child is not a detour, it's a signal. It's awakening knocking on your door in the language you're ready to hear. And the reparenting conversation, that sacred, quiet inner dialogue between you and the child, it's not just healing, it's creation, it's revision, it's the mechanism through which your consciousness shifts and your reality follows. You're not broken and trying to fix yourself. You're waking up, and the child is showing you the way. If this is resonating with you and you want to go deeper, I have a free masterclass, the 4-step method to break toxic cycles and become the coach you're meant to be. And it's all about how the inner child is running your business and how reparenting starts to shift those patterns. The link is in the show notes. And if you want a hands-on tool to begin this work right now, my book, Healing the Inner Child with EFT Tapping, is also linked in the show notes. The child is not the problem you're solving. The child is the awakening you've been asking for. This is the Inner Child Revolution, and I'll see you next time.